So if I were to ask you, what is the toughest job in America to get? You could probably come up with a short list, and certainly somewhere on that list is going to be the job of an astronaut, right? You ever think about that? Maybe a dozen people are selected every decade to be astronauts for the United States. Do you know what they have to go through? The training that they have to endure and the requirements just to be able to be qualified? Thousands of people apply. You have to be an expert in science and engineering. You have to obviously be very physically fit, very strong. You have to also been a pilot with 1,000 hours of piloting experience. On and on and on the requirements go. It's extremely hard to become an astronaut because the requirements are so strict. This woman in 1996 made it. Name is Lisa Novak, and she was all of those things. She had a master's degree in aeronautical engineering. She studied postgraduate astrophysics at the U.S. Naval Academy. She flew air missions for the Navy in the Pacific for over 5 years. She met all the qualifications. She became an astronaut in 1996. I mean, her dream fulfilled. Unfortunately, not long after that, she washed out. She was in Houston, Texas at the time, and she found out that her boyfriend was cheating on her. So she got in her car and drove from Houston, Texas to Orlando, Florida, 15 hours one way in a diaper. And in the back of her car, she had zip ties, pepper spray, large garbage bags, and a not very carefully thought through plan to kidnap the other woman and do heaven knows what to her. But when she arrived in Orlando, she never got out of her car. She had an emotional breakdown. Police came, found all this, arrested her, and that's, the last that anyone really ever saw was her at her trial. Isn't it an amazing story? I've said before, and it's been a while since I talked about this subject, so I'm really glad to be speaking about it again, because your success in life is not going to be defined primarily by your intelligence, which in America we really emphasize. How smart are you? How good are your grades? This woman was super smart, right? Is super smart. Your success in life is not going to be primarily defined by your intelligence or your talent or your abilities. Your success in life, according to what we know now, is defined by something else called emotional intelligence. You ever heard of this? It is all the rage. People write about it constantly, talk about it constantly. It is an amazing subject. It's not too hard to understand. It's basically, if I'm thinking about emotional intelligence, for me, it means I'm aware of what I'm feeling, and I'm choosing how I let my emotions come out, rather than being controlled by them. And I'm also paying attention to the emotions that I see in you, and I'm interacting with those in a positive way. That's emotional intelligence. It is, like I said, one of the most studied things right now. There's a company called TalentSmart. They've done 500,000 plus surveys of people. You know what they've discovered in the research? 90% of all the top performers in any field are high in emotional intelligence. The best of the best are not defined by the best because they have high IQ. It's not their talent, it's not their ability, it's their emotional intelligence. How intelligent are they emotionally? Then the other interesting thing they discovered, some of you are like, I don't like what I get paid. Good news. Good news. You want more money? You know what their research has discovered? Emotional intelligence and earnings have a direct connection. For every point you raise your emotional intelligence, the income in your salary goes up by $1,300 a year. I mean, they just have so much scientific data about this. You can read on, go to their website, talentsmart.com, you can read about yourself. You want to earn more? Focus on emotional intelligence. Because as your emotional intelligence goes up, you have more opportunities. Your success goes up. It's fascinating. If you know me at all, you know I just love geeky data like this, so it's like, wow. So again, as I said, emotional intelligence is really about just four things. There's what I see, which is my own self-awareness, how aware am I of my emotions, and then what I do, how good am I at managing my emotions. Are we doing good as a nation on that box right there, managing our emotional expressions? How are we doing on that? not so good. And then what I see in you, which is social awareness, how aware am I of what's going on in your heart in life, and then also relationship management, because once I see what's going on in you, how do I interact with you in a positive way so that I can be a positive influence in your life? So the very first box is where it all begins, and that's emotional self-awareness. So let me define that. Self-awareness is your ability to accurately perceive your emotions and stay aware of them as they happen. How good are you at that? How aware are you of your emotions as they happen? This is really critical stuff. So I'll be really honest with you. I have been reading and studying this since I first heard about it probably 15 years ago. I heard a speaker at a leadership conference talking about emotional intelligence, and I'm just curious. It's like, wow, I wonder what that's about. And so I started reading, and I bought a stack of books, and I went to the beach, and I just read and read and read, which is like my favorite thing to do. And I learned, and the very first thing that I became aware of is how little emotional self-awareness I had at the time. They say it is the most important one. In all my years of working at this, I completely agree. Everything flows from this. And to be very honest with you, I had barely any at the time. I was not aware of my emotions as they were happening to me, and there are serious consequences for that. So I have learned a lot about this subject. I'm really excited to start a series about it today. We're starting a series, and we're calling it Mastering Your Emotions, and we're going to talk about this. How do you develop this emotional self-awareness? We're starting just this one piece. So I want to ask you to open your program, and inside you'll grab these notes, take them out, grab a pen, something to write with. Welcome to those of you who are watching online, of course. So glad you're tuning in and watching either on YouTube or at our Peniel website at penielchurchlife.com. So you have these notes. There are going to be some things you're going to want to write down. Let's jump right into this. All right, first thing is you need to get the right view on your emotions. Number one. You need to get the right view on your emotions. If it's been a while since you've read your Bible, you may not be aware of this, but the Bible has a very positive view on emotions. It says things like this. In Ecclesiastes, one of the wisest men who ever lived, Solomon, he said, there's a time for everything. And then look at the emotions in this. There's a time to weep, right? That's emotional. And there's a time to laugh. That's emotional. It's time to mourn, a time to dance. And he goes on and lists other things that are part of, it's like, it's appropriate for you to be letting your emotions out in a healthy way. It's so interesting. Matter of fact, there's a big quote on your notes, but I want to just highlight just this aspect of it. This author said, Jesus felt all of these emotions and more recorded in the Bible. He felt affection, anguish, anger, compassion, distress, grief, gladness, indignation, joy, love, peace, sadness, sympathy. He felt troubled. He felt weary. Over and over again, the Bible records the emotions of Jesus. So emotions have a very positive place in the Bible. Why I'm telling you that is because for over 30 years now, I've been a pastor. And for longer than that, I've been attending church. I started going to church, in we used to call it junior high, it's middle school, I don't know what you call it, but a long time ago. And I can tell you, predominantly, when you hear pastors and Christians talk about emotions, they talk about it in terms of these two things. They are unimportant, or they're wrong or bad or the enemy. As a matter of fact, the only appropriate emotion to display in most churches right now across the country is that one. Happy. Happy. When I was young, I used to teach children in our church and in churches, and we had a song that we taught them to sing. Some of you may remember it. It's called, I'm in right out, right up, right down, right happy all the time. That's what we taught them to sing. There's one emotion you can have. Happy all the time. Happy all the time. It's like that whole verse from Solomon. We're just going to cut that out of the Bible, crinkle it up, throw it away. There is only a time for happiness. And so that's why, in my opinion, churches are some of the fakest places on the planet, because the only acceptable emotion in most churches is happy. Happy. And it's probably why there's so little transformation, because the reality is many of you feel something other than happy this morning. And so then you feel those other emotions and you got to hide them, right? put them away. You got to wear a mask. Can't let anyone else know it. And then we bring that into our relationship with God, and it's all fake, and God can't stand it. Because the reality is, this is not what God wants for us. This is not at all what he had planned for us. Now, where does all this come from? Why is this the culture of our church, and why is it the culture of so many people's homes? I mean, the truth is, some of you, if I were to ask you and you were to give me an honest answer about what you think about emotions, you'd be like, who cares? Some of you, that would be your honest answer, is they just don't, who cares? So for me, I mean, most of my life, that would have been my answer. And I've told this story before. I mean, most of my life, I was raised by a Marine officer. So a Vietnam veteran who I was talking to my mom about this week. She's, my dad was in Vietnam when I was born. He didn't hold me for the first 8 months of my life. My dad is the polar opposite of me. Emotions are never to be expressed and never to be communicated. When I was growing up, do you know me? I'm passionate, and just the total opposite. If I cheered too loudly during a Packer game, if I got too excited during a Packer game, I was told to shut up. The only acceptable thing was to sit there with my eyes on the game and not react. So many painful experiences as a child that I learned at a young age that emotions are wrong. They're bad. My fantasy when I was young, one of the fantasies that, people ask, what did you want to be when you grew up? The only person I can ever remember wanting to be when I grew up? Spock from the old Star Trek. That's the only person I can ever remember wanting to be. Do you know the old Star Trek Spock? He had no emotions. None. That's all I can remember wanting to be. I didn't want to grow up and be the president. I didn't want to grow up and be an astronaut, a football player. I can only remember wanting to grow up and be Spock. And so you can do, your emotions have a dial, and you can spin those down. You can view them as the enemy and spin them down to nothing. That's what I did for the first 45 years of my life. Only 2 times as an adult can I remember crying before the age of 45. 2 times. It just was not a part of my life. Emotions were the enemy. They were to be destroyed and controlled. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about, because the home you were raised in, this is what was communicated to you. If your feelings are unimportant, stop. Were you ever told to stop feeling something? Stop feeling that way. Oh, okay. Thanks. Sure. Some of you learned in the home you were raised in not to trust your feelings. Some of you were told that the way you felt was stupid. What a stupid way to feel. Don't feel that. And so many of us were raised in homes where this was the culture and this is what we learned. But here's the problem with that. As one author said, you could spin that dial down. You can stuff your emotions down, suppress your emotions, ignore your emotions, but he said, when you do, this is what you get. You get things like depression, anxiety, addiction, you get obsessive thinking. These are all outcomes of emotional suppression. He said, if we have a feeling and we hold it in, then we are not going to feel well, and we're not going to be well. Listen, I don't know where you're at developmentally in terms of this whole topic of emotions, but I warn you with all that I have, that if you don't understand this or accept that this is true, swallowed and suppressed emotions, spin that dial down, they don't evaporate. They don't just go away. You're storing them up for a future payment day coming. It's a guarantee. Your body's keeping track now, and someday you'll really pay. Because they don't just evaporate. You're drinking poison and thinking it won't affect you. You cannot, and not that emotions are poisonous, but suppressing and denying and ignoring how you feel, that's what's poisonous. And it's so damaging to you. Because here's what we know when you read the Bible. God is an emotional God. Jesus demonstrated emotions, and emotions are a gift from God. So if you don't unwrap that gift from God, you're gonna pay a price for that. So I'm asking you, how aware are you today of what you're feeling? Do you look at your emotions as a gift, or something to be avoided, or something to be suppressed? once you have the right view of them, that they are a gift from God, then you can do the next two things. And we're only going to do these next two. Obviously, once you recognize that God created you as an emotional being and your emotions are not flawed or wrong or bad or evil, now you need to start paying attention to them because God put them in you for a reason. God put emotions inside you for a reason. There's a reason he wants you to feel something. They're not a result of the fall of humanity. So, if I were to ask you, how good do you think you are at emotional self-awareness? Some of you would think, I'm really good at it. Man, emotions come into my body, I just feel them all. I'm totally aware. Some of you are like, I'm like Brian. All right, so here's the challenge. So when I started reading about this, I was stunned about this subject. So you think about all the emotions you can have in a typical day, right? I mean, just anything you could have. You could feel bored, you could feel content, you could feel disappointed, happy. I mean, I'm not reading all those to you. So do you know how many emotions you feel in a typical day? How many emotional experiences the average human being has in America? 456. Yeah, little surprise, right? So if yesterday was a typical day, how many of those did you catch? Okay, see the challenge here? Do you see the challenge? Yeah, your reaction was my reaction. The first time I read that, it's like, oh my goodness, I have so much to pay attention to. And your reaction is exactly what they discovered in the research. Do you know that only 36% of people are able to accurately identify their emotions as they happen? Which to me seems like a high number. There's 36% of us floating around that catch that? I am not in the 36%, not even close. So 2/3 of us are being, listen, 2/3 of us have emotions going off during the day, firing during the day that are impacting and directing and affecting our choices, and we're not even aware of it. Because you control that dial. You can spin it down. You can spin it down so you are ignoring emotions, suppressing emotions, denying emotions. You control that. So you can do that, and then it affects you. That's what's so sad, is there are a lot of people, well, for goodness sakes, America today is like a melting pot of people being directed by their emotions and not paying attention to it at all. It's not new. It's been around forever. There's a really, really sad story in the Bible. Jesus goes in a boat with his disciples. He goes across the sea, and he comes to this place, and there's this man tortured by demons in his life, and it's just an awful situation. Jesus, because he is God among us, he heals the man, sets him free. And the community comes out, and they react this way to what Jesus has done. All the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them. I mean, this incredible, undeniable miracle, and they say, please go. And why? Because they were overcome with fear, so he got in the boat and left. They literally drove away the Savior and the Son of God because they were overcome with fear and because they weren't aware. You can't manage what you're not aware of. I've told you many times, almost always the worst decisions in life you'll make are made from fear. Not always. I mean, you should be afraid to play with a black widow spider. You should be afraid of that. And you should be afraid to have a pet lion. You should be afraid of that. Some things are appropriate fears, but the majority of the decisions we make out of fear are wrong. And if you don't even know when fear is a factor in your decision making, you can't manage that. If you're not aware when fear is affecting you, you're powerless. You cannot manage what you're not even aware of. So why, again, do we resist this so much? Okay, you may be sitting here going, okay, I got it. I know that I was raised in a home where emotions weren't valued at all. And I've got the dials spun down. So you're going to listen to this and you go, okay, what do I need to do? And people will still walk out of here or stop listening to this, and they will not make a change. And I'm warning you, this is why. Okay? Think about it. If you're going to actually do what I'm saying, some of the emotions you're going to be paying attention to, they're going to be painful, right? They're going to hurt. And for you to actually look at some of the things that you feel today that you're pretending aren't there, it's going to be painful for you. So who wants to look at something painful? But here's the point. You're in pain either way. You're in pain either way. You're either in pain because you look at the painful things in your life and you process them in a healthy way, or you're in pain because you spin the dial down and then your body keeps score. And you're stacking up internal pain that will affect you in this life. You don't get a choice. So what should we do with this? Well, I came across this really cool acronym called RULER. I'm going to only go through the first 3 this week, but here's what you do. For those of you sitting here going, okay, I know I need to pay more attention to my emotions. I'm not even close to catching the 456 emotions from yesterday. So what do you do? 3 things. So first, you recognize your emotions. Don't worry about writing these down. Flip your notes over on the back. I put them all right there. And even, like I said, we're only going through the first 3 today. We'll do the next 2 next week. You recognize your emotions. And like it says, you acknowledge that you're feeling something, even if you don't have a name for it. So here's, remember, I told you I've been working on this for a long time. Even today with Shanna, there are times when she'll say something wrong, and I'll say to her, I feel something. I feel something. I don't know what I feel. And she'll say, but what are you feeling? I'm like, I have no idea. But this is progress, everybody. This is progress. That's all you're trying to do, is just get to the point where you can comfortably say, I feel something. You don't have to, in the moment, be able to name it. The first thing to do is just start paying attention to your body enough that you can actually say, I feel something. That's all this is. Recognize that you're having an emotion. Then second, try and think about, well, what's underneath that? Well, in many cases, it's instant. You don't need to worry about it. It's like someone cuts you off in traffic and they're really rude and flip you off as they drive by. You feel something, and okay, you don't need to spend any time processing that. You already get it. But there are other times when you feel something you don't even know why. So then you're going to have to think about that, and the goal is this. Your goal is to get to letter L. As a matter of fact, if you're on your notes, I want you to circle this in, or put a star by it, or do something to really make this stand out, because this is really the key part of it. You have to learn how to label the emotions that you are sensing are inside of you. This is so important. I normally never do this kind of thing. I normally never put something, I love science. I love the field of neuroscience. I'm fascinated by this geeky stuff. I normally would never put this technical of a quote up on the screen, but I want you to process this with me, because I want you to understand how significant this is for you. So the field of neuroscience, they hook you up to machines. They watch what happens in your brain when you have an emotional reaction. And when you have an emotional reaction, the center of your brain where the emotions are centered is called the amygdala. And when you're hurt and you're in pain or you're embarrassed or you're ashamed or any of those painful emotions, your amygdala is going crazy. Here's what they've discovered. So they put these people through this experiment, and they asked these people who are having an emotional reaction in their brain, they said, to name the emotion. And that's when the prefrontal cortex activated, which is the thinking part of your brain. And notice what happened when they started thinking, what is the actual emotion I'm feeling? The emotional amygdala, that emotional center of their brain, slowed down. It reduced its reaction. So consciously recognizing your emotions reduces their impact on you. This is so significant. This is what happens in your body right now if you're just like, you get hurt. Let's say your boss gives you some really unfair feedback in your next performance review. Ever have that happen? Hurts like crazy. And so all of a sudden your amygdala is reacting, the emotional part of you. It starts reacting big. And all it wants you to do, it's like it's saying, would you please acknowledge this? That's all it's asking. Would you please acknowledge that this is how I'm feeling? And when you turn toward it and you go, oh, I hear you. And you're actually talking to yourself. It's like, I feel really embarrassed by what my boss said about me. Or I feel like that was unfair because I did everything they said and this was unfair. When you acknowledge the feeling, the thinking part of your brain becomes more active, and the feeling part, the wounded part, goes down. You silence the wounded parts inside of you by acknowledging their pain. This is so significant. I don't know if you understand how significant this is, but I really hope you do. If you'll just acknowledge them. So I've used this for years in my life. This is an emotion chart. If you go online and Google it, you can find emotion charts like this. Because this is how screwed up I am, okay? So I'm just going to be really honest with you. When I first started reading about emotional intelligence, I knew immediately I was not self-aware. I knew immediately I was having emotions. Then I read that 456, and I'm like, I can't name 4 a week, let alone 456 a day. I'm so screwed up, so I didn't know what to do, and so I went online and found a chart like this, and you can see what it is. It's just it's a feelings chart. Happy, sad, angry, afraid, and ashamed, and then how intense, high, medium, and low. And I printed this off, and I put it in my notebook where I journaled. I have it on my desktop at my computer, my personal laptop. I have it everywhere. So that when I'm actually trying to do what I'm telling you, I started doing this. I started sitting down whenever I'm like, oh, I feel something. Wonder what that is. I would journal about it, write about it, either on my computer or my notebook. Here's what happened. And I would pull this chart out and I would say, what am I feeling? And the better I got at this over the years, the more I could name it, well, then this was happened. This is an actual journal entry from my life from August 16th, 2017. I wrote, I was very depressed for the last 9 days, and I would not admit it to myself. I didn't even allow myself to see all the signs. But this was a bad one. So I ended up journaling last night about all the pain, and it was amazing how much healing I felt. It's like those wounded parts inside of you are just begging you to say, oh, you feel embarrassed right now. Oh, you feel really jealous right now. You feel taken for granted right now. I get it. And then they go quiet. They're like, okay, we've been heard. Some of you, this is the most important thing I'm showing you today. So again, what steps can you take to start to become more aware of your emotions? Now there's another real great advantage God has given us. Look at this. Pay attention to your body. Because this is so important to God, He actually wired your heart and your body to have a direct connection. This is fascinating to me. Again, my belief in God, this is just thrilling to me because of how He made us. And again, I could show you so many examples of people like this guy. His name is Roger Pion. Maybe you heard about him. Made the news not that long ago, out in Newbury, Connecticut. He had a little bit of drug problem. And so he was caught one day with a small amount of marijuana. Not a too big a deal, wasn't going to be real. I mean, they just arrested him, charged him, and sent him home. No big deal. But he went home and he started fuming about this, how unfair it all was. And remember, he wasn't not very emotionally intelligent because of what he did. Emotional intelligence is about, I need to be aware of this and I need to manage it properly. He didn't manage it very properly. He had a very big tractor. A very big tractor. So he got in the tractor, he drove into town, and he went to the police department with his tractor, and he ran over 7 police cars and crushed them, including 2 that had police officers in them. Now, they got out okay, but this minor little drug offense that was going to cost him a little community service has been transformed. 14 criminal charges, including felony aggravated assault on a police officer, which alone can put you behind bars for 16 years. I wish I could tell you that this kind of stuff is rare, but you know better. The news is filled with examples of this, where emotions just run people's lives. We don't want to ignore our emotions, and we don't want them controlling us. We want to be a whole human being where we are interacting positively with emotions that God has put inside of us. And when you look at the Bible, God gives you an incredible clue about how important your emotions are to you because of what He made them do inside of your body. Look at what the Bible's been saying for several thousand years. Job said, "Fear gripped me and my bones trembled." Isn't that fascinating? Like, you ever felt like fear just go right up your spine? You ever felt that? How about this? Proverbs 17:22, joyful heart is good medicine. Medicine. This emotion makes your body healthier. Do you know we know that, right? You know that we know that patients who are taught gratitude in the hospital recover faster than people who don't. We know that. It's just scientifically validated. You can teach people how to think positively, how to be grateful, and they will recover faster because that verse has been true for thousands of years since it was written. The Bible says your emotions have a direct impact on your body. I wish I had time to read Proverbs 14:13, Isaiah 7:2, Psalm 22:14, all these other verses that talk about the direct connection between your emotions and your body. Because that's how God made you. God made you with emotions, and he made your emotions to impact your body. By the way, this was the worst part of how I lived my life, is because I spun the dial down, I wouldn't pay attention to my emotions. Oh, they were still affecting my body. I mean, many of you know that I had chronic migraines for 40 years. They would put me in the emergency room time after time after time. You can't avoid this. It's going to affect you because your body is connected by God to your heart. So you can try. But what's so fascinating is that some scientists in Finland wanted to see how they affect our body. So they put people in front of a computer screen, 700 people, 700 volunteers from around the globe. So not just like Americans or people from Finland, all cultures represented. And they had a screen up there with a silhouette of a human being, a human body, and they made their brain react emotionally through a movie clip or a story or something to try and create an emotional reaction in the amygdala. And then they wanted, depending on the emotion, they wanted them to highlight on the screen where they either felt it or, because sometimes your feelings get intense and sometimes it's like you grow numb. Here's what they charted. And it was true, by the way. It's a body map, and this is just part of it. Across cultures, doesn't matter. Everybody around the globe feels specific emotions in specific places in their body. Now, obviously, if we went into an Asian culture, they would express their emotions very different than we would, right? Or we went into South America, they might express their emotions very different. Doesn't mean they don't feel them. I find this fascinating. God, when he made us as emotional beings, and our emotions impact our bodies, and all around the globe, they impact us in the same spot. Isn't that fascinating to you? My theology just grows. I just love my God who does this. So this is what we know, is that your emotions impact you specifically in very specific parts in your body. So I learned this firsthand in 2016. 2016, I was 45 years old at the time, April 28th, 2016. I'll never forget it. It was the day when all the walls that I had built protecting my heart from painful things fell down. It was April 28th, 2018. I'd gotten so bad at this, everybody, that when I was 30 years old, my grandma Ruby died, and I loved her. I just loved my grandma. One of the most important people in my life. She passed away. I went to her funeral, and I felt nothing. It might as well have been a stranger who died. I felt nothing. And that's when I knew how screwed up I was. I was 30 years old when I finally became aware that I'd spun that dial off and I had no idea how to turn it back on. April 28th, your body's keeping score. You can try and fight this. Go ahead. No, please don't. Please don't. Please don't. I'm begging you. You have no idea the pain that you're headed for. When that wall fell down, everything that I had hid from my entire life had to be grieved. I mean, I was an absolute mess for a long time. I had to grieve the loss of my grandma and so many other things during that year. And that's what I learned this is true. I didn't know you could feel emotions in your body. I didn't know it. And all of a sudden I started feeling them. Like anxiety in the bottom left-hand corner, you see how it's really intensified here in the middle? It's like some of you know what it's like to feel anxious. I hate that feeling. It's like, man, I want to turn that one off. You don't get to selectively choose which ones you turn off. You turn one off, you turn them all off. But yuck, that feels terrible in my body. I didn't know that. Didn't know it till that day. And then anger, oh man, upper left-hand corner. From like here to here, as you can see, it's all red. That's where people feel it around the world. It's like for me, I've often described it as like someone grabs the nape of my neck with a hand, starts squeezing. It's like, wow. And then fear. Depending on the intensity of fear, there have been times when I've heard something or seen something, all of a sudden I get that like flitter right up the spine of my back and you can see fear is the second one in the top column, and you can see it's centered there. It's like, oh my goodness, I didn't know you could feel all these things. Do you know the advantage I have now in my life? I was recently in a meeting, somebody said something, and all of a sudden, like the grip on the back of my neck. It's like, I'm angry. I'm instantly aware. I'm angry. And now I have an advantage. Now my emotion doesn't get to direct to me. I could, in that meeting, step back, not step back physically, but in my mind go, oh, I'm feeling really angry right now. I wonder what's underneath that. And now my emotions don't direct my behavior. I get to choose. I get to choose. So God has given us an incredible gift when he gave us this connection between our body and our heart. All right, so that's all we really have time for today. What I want you to walk out of here knowing, I hope this has become clear to you today. I hope you know that your emotions are a gift from God and not a curse. Sometimes they don't feel like a gift, right? We all get that. But your emotions are a gift from God, who is himself an emotional being. God is emotional. And we see his emotions all through the pages of the Bible. We saw them demonstrated by Jesus. And you were created not on accident as an emotional being. You were created on purpose as an emotional being by God. So pay attention to your emotions. And what I want you to do is I want you just to be honest about how self-aware you are. I just want you to be honest about it. How many of the 456 emotions yesterday did you catch? Right? Some of you are like me, sitting here going, I got some work to do. I'm not quite where I need to be. And what I really want you to do, try one thing. I want you to get a notebook, or you can use a computer, I don't care what you use, and I want you to think about one painful experience you've been through. Maybe it's something that's happening right now, and you're in pain as you're listening to me today. You're hurting. And I want you to put down the date. This is what I do whenever I do this. I put down the date. I write the story of what's going on in my life in that moment. And then I get that chart out. And you can Google it. There are lots of different charts. Emotions chart, just Google it. Put it somewhere, and then write every emotion that you think you feel. And so it's like, oh man, I feel really hurt right now. Why do I feel hurt? I feel hurt because I felt like my opinion in the meeting didn't matter at all. And really spend some time being curious and thinking about what emotions you feel. What you'll find is many times you don't just have one emotion in there. Many painful things. Like, I think the record for me is 14 emotions in one event. That's how you get to 456 real quick. You don't just have one emotion. You got many. And the more self-aware you get, here, this is the best thing. The more self-aware you get, the better you're able to work with your emotions rather than having your emotions direct your behavior. You don't want to be controlled by this. If you want to know what I think about God and the emotions when it comes to you and me, do you know the number one emotion God has when he thinks about you? It's not embarrassment. It's not what some of you think. Some of you think he's embarrassed. Nope. It's not anger. Lots of Christians will tell you it's anger. It's not. It's love. It is an indescribable love. He says that in the book of Ephesians. You've never come close to understanding how deeply, and here's the thing, is we love here way too often, right? We have an intellectual love. We love with our head. Oh, he doesn't. He loves you with all of his heart. The heart of God is aimed at you. He just loves you. And the proof of how great his love is what he's done by sending his son to die on the cross for all of us. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish today. Maybe the next step for you is to let Jesus Christ do this incredible work inside of you. The Bible says, because God loved us so much, he sent his son, and Jesus went to the cross for all of us because he loved us that much. And what was happening in that moment on the cross is he put in his own body all the things that are wrong that we've ever done. any unloving word or thought or deed we've ever brought into this world, Jesus paid in full for. And if you will let him, he'll forgive you. And he will put his seal on you. He will identify you as his very own, his own son, his own daughter, because he loves you like that. And if that's what you want, with your head bowed, you can say something like this. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. I want to experience your love in my life. Not just to know about it, but to really experience it. Come take your home up inside of me. I certainly know I've been unloving in this life, and I've heard you died for that. Please forgive me. I want a real relationship with you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, as we finish, can I ask you all to take the little card out of your program and let us know. If you just prayed, there's a box that says, I asked Jesus to forgive me. If you've done this online, if you just prayed that prayer, go to our website at penuelchurchlife.com, and in the upper right-hand corner is a box that says, I said yes to Jesus. Just check that box. Let us know what you've done. We'll send you all some follow-up material in the mail. So again, when you're done with this, just drop it in one of the offering boxes on the way out today. Thanks so much for coming. Hope you can come back next week for the next part of this.